It began as a hushed conversation behind Kensington Palace walls, one that aides tried to downplay and courtiers quickly silenced. But the look on Princess Catherine's face as she exited that private meeting said everything the palace couldn't. Something was wrong, and it involved Charlotte. What was first dismissed as a rumor soon turned into a royal firestorm, now confirmed by the very people who fought to protect it. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For weeks, whispers had been circulating through royal circles, dismissed publicly as speculation, yet quietly discussed behind closed doors by those closest to the family. Palace officials maintained their usual calm exterior, but insiders would later claim that an unusual level of concern had been building beneath the surface. The turning point reportedly came during a confidential meeting attended by Prince William, Princess Catherine, and a small group of trusted medical advisors. No official statement followed. No reassuring briefing was offered. Instead, silence settled over the palace like a heavy curtain, and that silence spoke louder than any announcement ever could. Those who witnessed the aftermath described a mood unlike anything they had seen in recent years. Staff members were instructed to keep discussions private. Questions were redirected. Conversations ended abruptly whenever certain topics were raised. The secrecy itself became impossible to ignore. Then came the reports that would send royal watchers into a frenzy. Sources began speaking of a sudden health development concerning Princess Charlotte, a matter serious enough to command immediate attention from senior members of the family. While details remained closely guarded, the reaction from those involved fueled growing concern. Catherine, known for her composure under extraordinary pressure, appeared visibly shaken following the meeting. Those familiar with her steady public presence noticed a difference immediately. It was not what she said that drew attention. It was what she did not say. The usual confidence seemed replaced by an unmistakable weight, as though she had been handed information capable of changing everything. Meanwhile, Prince William's actions only deepened the mystery. Later that evening, he was reportedly seen spending extended time with Charlotte, offering comfort and reassurance in a way that many interpreted as deeply personal and unusually urgent. To outsiders, it appeared to be a father supporting his daughter. To insiders, however, it looked like something more. Questions multiplied. Why had senior advisors been involved? Why were palace aides suddenly operating under strict instructions? And why did multiple media figures privately admit that something had felt off for weeks before the story began to surface? The pieces did not seem to fit together, yet they were all pointing toward a truth that remained carefully hidden from public view. As speculation intensified, another possibility began to emerge from behind the curtain of secrecy. What if the growing concern surrounding Charlotte was only one part of a much larger story? What if the private meetings, the guarded conversations, and the unusual behavior from senior royals were connected to something far older than anyone realized? Because the chilling truth wasn't just about Charlotte's health, it was tied to a royal legacy that had long been buried, until now. While public attention remained fixed elsewhere, a quiet proposal was making its way through Windsor Castle. On paper, it looked like a routine modernization effort. Behind closed doors, however, senior royals reportedly viewed it as something far more dangerous, and no one reacted more strongly than Prince William. The troubling questions surrounding Charlotte had already placed the royal household under enormous pressure. But even as that deeply personal concern continued to dominate private discussions, another issue was quietly gaining momentum within the palace. It did not involve medical advisors or family health. Instead, it centered on a proposal that many initially dismissed as administrative housekeeping. The language appeared harmless. The objectives sounded practical. Supporters described it as a necessary update designed to bring certain Windsor Castle traditions into line with a changing era. Yet beneath those carefully chosen words, critics claimed something far more significant was unfolding. What seemed like a simple adjustment to protocol was increasingly being viewed as an attempt to reshape authority itself, and that realization sent a wave of unease through royal circles. According to insiders, senior palace officials had spent months discussing changes that would affect ceremonial responsibilities, oversight procedures, and long-established customs that had survived generations of monarchs. The proposal reportedly sought to redefine how certain decisions were handled within Windsor Castle, shifting influence away from traditional structures and toward a more centralized system. To some, it represented progress. To others, it represented a direct challenge to centuries of royal practice. The deeper officials examined the details, the more divisive the proposal became. What had started as a bureaucratic conversation was rapidly transforming into a battle over identity, tradition, and control. Prince William reportedly became aware of the proposal during a confidential briefing attended by a small group of trusted advisors. Those familiar with the meeting claim the atmosphere changed almost immediately as the implications became clear. This was not simply about schedules, ceremonies, or operational efficiency. It touched the very foundation of how royal authority was exercised within one of the monarchy's most symbolic institutions. Sources suggest William listened carefully before raising concerns that many others had been hesitant to voice. If these changes moved forward, what traditions would remain protected? And once long-standing rules were altered, what would prevent future revisions from going even further? Those questions spread quickly behind palace walls. Resistance emerged almost as soon as the proposal gained attention. Some insiders reportedly argued that modernization was unavoidable and necessary for the monarchy's future survival. Others warned that abandoning established customs could weaken the very institutions they were trying to preserve. The debate became increasingly intense, drawing in advisors, officials, and influential figures whose loyalties were not always clear. Every conversation seemed to reveal new divisions. Every answer appeared to create even more questions. Most troubling of all was the growing uncertainty surrounding the proposal's true origins. Who had first pushed for these changes? Who stood to benefit if they succeeded? And why had the effort remained so quiet until now? As rumors multiplied, suspicion began replacing confidence. Individuals who had once appeared united suddenly found themselves on opposite sides of a widening divide. Long-standing alliances became harder to read. Private conversations took on greater significance. The controversy was no longer about paperwork or protocol. It had become a struggle over the future direction of the monarchy itself. And as details spread through royal circles, William realized the proposal carried consequences far beyond ceremonial procedure. The moment Prince William reviewed the proposal, sources claim his response was swift and unmistakable. What many expected to be a routine approval instead became one of the most intense internal disagreements Windsor had seen in years. The proposal had already triggered concern throughout the palace, but as more details emerged, the situation moved beyond quiet unease and entered far more dangerous territory. What had once been discussed in careful whispers was now becoming the subject of increasingly difficult conversations among those closest to the heart of the monarchy. According to insiders, Prince William did not view the proposed changes as harmless modernization. He reportedly saw them as a challenge to principles that had guided generations before him. For William, this was not simply a debate about administrative procedures. It was a question of what kind of institution the monarchy would become if its oldest traditions were gradually replaced by new rules crafted behind closed doors. Sources claim that shortly after reviewing the proposal in full, William formally objected to several of its most controversial sections. His concerns reportedly centered on preserving long-standing customs that had helped define royal authority for decades. While supporters argued that change was necessary to keep pace with modern expectations, William is said to have pushed back forcefully, warning that certain traditions existed for a reason. They were not outdated relics, they were foundations. Remove enough foundations, he reportedly feared, and even the strongest structure could begin to weaken. That argument quickly transformed what many expected to be a simple review process into a deeply personal struggle over legacy, responsibility, and the future of the crown itself. As William's objections became known within senior circles, tensions rose dramatically. Private meetings that were initially intended to build consensus instead became increasingly strained. Advisors who had once appeared united found themselves separated into competing camps. Some quietly supported William's position, believing that tradition remained one of the monarchy's greatest strengths. Others viewed resistance as an obstacle to necessary reform. Every discussion seemed to widen the divide. Every attempt at compromise uncovered another point of disagreement. The atmosphere became so charged that even routine conversations reportedly carried an undercurrent of suspicion and uncertainty. Senior staff soon found themselves in the difficult position of trying to prevent the growing conflict from escalating further. Palace officials worked behind the scenes to ease tensions, encouraging dialogue and urging both sides to focus on common goals. Yet the deeper they dug into the proposal, the harder it became to find common ground. The debate was no longer about a handful of policy adjustments. It had become symbolic of something much larger. One side feared losing the traditions that had protected the monarchy through countless challenges. The other feared that refusing to adapt could leave the institution vulnerable in a rapidly changing world. Both believed they were defending the future, and that made compromise extraordinarily difficult. Soon, rumors of heated exchanges behind palace doors began circulating among insiders. Stories emerged of tense briefings, difficult conversations, and disagreements that stretched late into the evening. No official confirmation ever arrived, but the growing volume of speculation suggested that the controversy had reached a critical stage. The battle lines were becoming clearer, and with each passing day, the stakes seemed to grow higher. Yet even as attention focused on William's resistance, another mystery was beginning to emerge. Because the deeper officials looked into the proposal itself, the more unsettling its origins appeared to be. And William's objections were only the beginning, because the origins of the proposal soon raised even more troubling questions. As palace insiders traced the proposal's origins, attention shifted away from the document itself and toward the people who helped shape it. What they discovered only deepened the controversy. What began as a disagreement over protocol was rapidly evolving into something far more complex. Prince William's resistance had forced senior officials to look beyond the proposal's contents and examine the forces driving it. That decision opened a door many within Windsor may have preferred to keep closed. The deeper insiders looked, the more they realized that the controversy was not simply about new procedures or updated rules. It was about influence. It was about power. And perhaps most importantly, it was about competing visions for what Windsor Castle and the monarchy itself should become in the years ahead. Questions soon emerged regarding the individuals who had quietly helped shape the proposal from the beginning. While official explanations emphasized efficiency and modernization, critics reportedly suspected that larger ambitions were hidden beneath the surface. Certain advisors believed the institution needed to evolve aggressively in order to remain relevant. Others argued that rapid transformation could weaken traditions that had preserved stability through generations of crisis. What made the situation particularly explosive was that neither side viewed itself as the villain. Each believed it was protecting the monarchy. Each believed it was acting in the crown's best interests. And that conviction made the conflict far more dangerous than a simple policy dispute. As discussions intensified, long-standing rivalries that had remained buried for years reportedly began resurfacing. Old disagreements, once carefully managed behind closed doors, suddenly found new life within the debate. Relationships that had appeared stable became increasingly strained. Trusted colleagues questioned one another's motives. Private loyalties became harder to identify. In an institution built on discretion and unity, the growing atmosphere of suspicion created a sense of uncertainty that few could ignore. Some insiders described the situation as a silent struggle unfolding beneath a polished public image, with every conversation carrying consequences far greater than anyone was willing to admit openly. At the center of the controversy stood competing groups of senior advisors, each promoting a different path forward. One faction reportedly argued that Windsor Castle needed a modern framework capable of adapting to future challenges. Another warned that abandoning established structures would create instability and confusion at the highest levels of royal authority. Neither side appeared willing to retreat. Every proposal was met with resistance. Every compromise generated new disagreements. The result was an increasingly fragile environment where even small decisions became politically charged. What had once been a united effort to guide the monarchy forward was beginning to resemble a contest for influence over its future direction. Meanwhile, palace staff found themselves caught in the middle of the growing divide. Those responsible for maintaining daily operations reportedly became increasingly nervous as uncertainty spread through the institution. Rumors traveled quickly. Speculation grew louder. Staff members who once felt confident about Windsor's direction suddenly found themselves wondering what changes might come next and who would ultimately emerge with greater authority. The lack of clear answers only fueled anxiety. The proposal had become more than a document. It had become a symbol of a deeper struggle unfolding within the heart of the royal household. Yet perhaps the most troubling discovery was that no one seemed entirely certain where the battle would end. Every new revelation uncovered another layer of complexity. Every explanation raised fresh questions. The debate was no longer confined to protocol or procedure. It was expanding into a broader confrontation about leadership, influence, and the monarchy's future identity. And as competing factions formed, a much larger battle over the future of the monarchy began to unfold. For generations, Windsor Castle symbolized unity and continuity. Now, insiders whispered that the same walls were witnessing a growing divide, one that threatened to reshape relationships at the highest levels of the royal household. The controversy surrounding the protocol proposal had reached a point where it could no longer be dismissed as an internal disagreement. What began as a debate among advisors was now affecting the atmosphere throughout the royal household itself. Conversations became more guarded. Trust became harder to maintain. The sense of certainty that had long defined Windsor's inner circle was slowly being replaced by unease. With every passing day, the proposal seemed less like a policy discussion and more like a test of loyalty, conviction, and vision. Those who once worked side by side found themselves viewing events through entirely different lenses, and that growing divide was becoming impossible to ignore. At the center of the storm stood two competing beliefs about the monarchy's future. Supporters of the proposal argued that adaptation was essential if the institution hoped to remain strong in a changing world. They believed Windsor needed new systems, new approaches, and greater flexibility to face modern challenges. Opponents saw the situation very differently. To them, the proposal represented a dangerous departure from principles that had survived wars, scandals, and generations of political change. They feared that once certain traditions were weakened, they could never truly be restored. Both sides believed they were defending the crown. Both claimed to be acting in its best interests. Yet that shared goal only intensified the conflict because neither side could easily accept defeat. As the divide deepened, concerns about public perception began weighing heavily on senior figures. The monarchy's strength had always relied not only on tradition, but also on public confidence. Insiders reportedly worried that if disagreements became visible beyond palace walls, they could damage the image of stability that generations had worked so hard to protect. Every decision suddenly carried greater consequences. Every rumor risked fueling further speculation. The challenge was no longer just about resolving a dispute. It was about preventing that dispute from becoming a symbol of division at a time when unity was desperately needed. Meanwhile, uncertainty continued spreading among palace staff. Employees who had spent years navigating royal life found themselves facing questions with no clear answers. They watched as meetings multiplied and discussions grew increasingly intense. They heard fragments of conversations, conflicting interpretations, and endless speculation about what might happen next. The atmosphere became increasingly fragile. People who normally focused on their responsibilities now found themselves wondering how future decisions might affect the institution they served. The tension was no longer confined to senior officials. It was becoming part of Windsor's daily reality. At the heart of every debate stood one recurring issue: tradition. The proposal had transformed long-established customs into the central battleground of a much larger struggle. Supporters described change as progress. Opponents described preservation as duty. Neither argument lacked passion, and neither side appeared willing to retreat. Pressure mounted on senior royals to reveal where they stood. Remaining neutral was becoming increasingly difficult. Silence itself was beginning to look like a decision. The higher the stakes rose, the more urgent the situation became. Yet despite the growing pressure, no resolution appeared in sight. The controversy continued expanding, drawing more voices into the debate and forcing difficult choices upon those who had hoped to avoid them. What had once seemed manageable now threatened to reshape relationships throughout the royal household. And just when it appeared the conflict could grow no larger, an unexpected influence quietly began to emerge from the shadows. Yet even as tensions escalated, one unexpected voice would soon alter the entire conversation. Though Prince William stood at the center of the dispute, insiders claim Catherine's role behind the scenes may have been just as significant. Her quiet presence reportedly became a stabilizing force during the crisis. As the conflict surrounding the Windsor Castle proposal continued to intensify, attention naturally focused on Prince William. His objections had transformed the debate into one of the most significant internal struggles the royal household had faced in years. Yet behind the headlines, behind the private meetings and growing divisions, another figure was quietly shaping the course of events. According to palace insiders, Catherine understood something that many others risked overlooking. The monarchy was not simply facing a disagreement over protocol. It was facing a test of unity. And if that unity fractured, the consequences could extend far beyond Windsor Castle itself. While competing factions argued over tradition and reform, Catherine reportedly encouraged a different approach. Rather than fueling division, she is said to have focused on preserving stability during an increasingly uncertain period. Those familiar with private discussions claim she repeatedly emphasized the importance of caution, patience, and perspective. The deeper the conflict became, the more urgent those qualities appeared. Catherine reportedly understood that every disagreement inside the royal household carried the potential to become a larger public issue. In a time when scrutiny followed the monarchy's every move, even small cracks could quickly become impossible to hide. Behind closed doors, conversations increasingly centered on a difficult question. How could the institution navigate change without damaging the traditions that defined it? It was a challenge with no easy answer. On one side stood those demanding modernization. On the other stood those determined to protect long-established customs. Catherine reportedly resisted the temptation to view the situation as a battle with winners and losers. Instead, she focused on finding common ground wherever possible. Her concern was not merely the outcome of the proposal itself. It was the long-term health of the monarchy and the public confidence that sustained it. At the same time, worries about the monarchy's future image continued to grow. Palace insiders understood that public trust depended heavily on perceptions of stability, discipline, and unity. Any sign of internal conflict risked creating questions that could linger for years. Catherine reportedly recognized this danger early. While others focused on immediate victories, she remained focused on protecting the institution from lasting damage. That perspective increasingly drew attention from senior aides and advisors searching for a path through the crisis. As tensions rose, more voices reportedly began seeking her opinion, believing she offered a balanced perspective in an environment dominated by competing agendas. Throughout the controversy, William and Catherine were also said to have presented a remarkably united front. While their individual roles differed, their broader objective appeared consistent. Both wanted to protect the monarchy's future. Both wanted to avoid decisions that could create deeper divisions. That sense of shared purpose strengthened their position during increasingly difficult negotiations. It also reinforced Catherine's growing influence. Without making dramatic interventions or public declarations, she reportedly became one of the most respected voices in the conversation. Her ability to calm tensions, encourage dialogue, and maintain focus on the bigger picture quietly altered the dynamics of the entire debate. Yet even Catherine's efforts could not eliminate the reality confronting Windsor Castle. The divisions remained. The questions remained. The pressure continued to mount with each passing day. Every meeting seemed to bring fresh complications. Every attempt at compromise revealed new obstacles. Time was running short, and those responsible for guiding the monarchy forward could no longer postpone the moment of reckoning. But while efforts were made to calm the situation, a crucial decision was rapidly approaching. As weeks of debate reached a breaking point, palace officials understood that delaying a decision was no longer possible. Someone would have to win. Someone would have to compromise, and the outcome could change Windsor forever. By this stage, the atmosphere surrounding the Windsor Castle proposal had become impossible to ignore. What had started as a quiet discussion about protocol had transformed into a full-scale struggle over the monarchy's future direction. Every effort to slow the controversy had failed. Every attempt to postpone a final judgment had only increased the pressure. The divisions that once existed in private conversations were now influencing nearly every important discussion taking place behind palace walls. There was a growing realization among senior officials that time had run out. The uncertainty could not continue indefinitely. A decision was needed, and everyone understood that the consequences would extend far beyond the proposal itself. As the crucial moment approached, a series of final meetings were reportedly scheduled behind closed doors. These gatherings carried a level of importance rarely seen within royal circles. Senior advisors arrived with carefully prepared arguments. Palace officials reviewed possible outcomes. Trusted figures weighed risks and opportunities with extraordinary caution. Yet beneath the formal discussions, a deeper reality remained. This was no longer simply a question of policy. It was a contest between competing visions for Windsor's future. Every participant entered the room knowing that the choices made in those meetings could influence the institution for years to come. Throughout the process, Prince William reportedly remained unwavering in his position. Despite growing pressure to soften his objections, insiders claim he continued to defend the principles he believed were at stake. For William, the issue had never been about resisting change for its own sake. It was about protecting traditions that he viewed as essential to the monarchy's stability and identity. As negotiations intensified, his determination became one of the defining forces shaping the debate. Supporters praised his commitment. Critics questioned whether compromise was still possible. Regardless of where opinions fell, few doubted the seriousness of his conviction. Meanwhile, advocates of reform made their own final push. They argued that modernization was not a threat, but a necessity. According to supporters, Windsor Castle could not rely solely on traditions established in a different era. The monarchy, they insisted, needed flexibility to adapt to new challenges and changing expectations. Their arguments were passionate, carefully constructed, and increasingly urgent. With the decision drawing near, neither side appeared willing to surrender ground. Every conversation felt more important than the last. Every proposal carried the weight of potential consequences. Behind the scenes, palace leadership faced an extraordinarily difficult calculation. They were tasked not only with evaluating the proposal itself, but also with considering the broader impact of whichever path they chose. Rejecting the changes could preserve stability among traditionalists, while frustrating those who sought reform. Approving them could signal progress while risking deeper divisions within the institution. The challenge was not merely deciding what was right. It was deciding what would best protect the monarchy from future turmoil. That responsibility weighed heavily on those charged with making the final call. As word spread that a resolution was approaching, anticipation surged throughout royal circles. Advisors waited anxiously. Staff members speculated about possible outcomes. Supporters on both sides prepared themselves for either victory or disappointment. The sense of expectation became almost impossible to escape. Everyone knew the debate was nearing its conclusion, yet no one knew exactly how it would end. The future of the proposal, and perhaps much more than that, hung in the balance. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the response that would determine Windsor Castle's path forward. The controversy may have started with a protocol proposal, but it evolved into something much larger: a battle over identity, tradition, and the future direction of the monarchy itself. And even now, the final chapter may not have been written. When the long-awaited response finally arrived, many expected the tension that had gripped Windsor Castle for weeks to begin fading away. Instead, the decision seemed to mark the beginning of a new chapter rather than the end of the story. The proposal, that once appeared to be a routine administrative adjustment, had transformed into one of the most revealing royal controversies in recent memory. It had exposed competing visions for the future, tested relationships behind palace walls, and forced some of the monarchy's most influential figures to confront difficult questions about what should change and what must remain protected. Even after the immediate dispute began settling, the impact of the debate continued to echo throughout royal circles. One thing had become impossible to ignore. Prince William's stance had reshaped the conversation. Whether supporters agreed with him or not, his willingness to challenge the proposal altered the course of events. What might have passed quietly through internal channels instead became the subject of intense scrutiny and discussion. His objections forced palace officials to examine assumptions, reconsider priorities, and confront concerns that might otherwise have remained hidden. In doing so, he became more than a participant in the controversy. He became one of its defining figures. The debate was no longer simply about protocol. It had become a reflection of broader questions about leadership, responsibility, and the future role of tradition within a modern monarchy. Yet despite the decision that emerged from those final meetings, many questions remain unanswered. The discussion surrounding reform has not disappeared. If anything, it has become more complex. Some believe the controversy delayed changes that will eventually return in a different form. Others believe the events proved that certain traditions still command deep loyalty within the institution. Both interpretations continue to circulate, ensuring that the conversation remains far from settled. The uncertainty itself has become part of the story. Every unanswered question leaves room for new speculation, and every lingering doubt creates opportunities for future conflict. Outside palace walls, public fascination has shown little sign of fading. The controversy captured attention not because of technical details or procedural changes, but because it touched something deeper. It raised questions about identity, continuity, and the delicate balance between preserving history and embracing the future. People who might never have cared about protocol suddenly found themselves drawn into the debate because they recognized the larger issues at stake. In many ways, the dispute became symbolic of challenges faced by institutions around the world, how to evolve without losing the qualities that define them. As a result, Windsor Castle remains firmly at the center of attention. The proposal may have been addressed, but its legacy continues influencing discussions behind closed doors. Advisors remain watchful. Observers continue searching for clues. Supporters and critics alike are waiting to see whether future reforms will emerge and how those reforms might be received. The sense of anticipation that surrounded the controversy has not disappeared. It has merely changed shape, and perhaps that is what makes this story so compelling. The most important battles are not always fought in public. They often unfold quietly through difficult decisions, private disagreements, and moments when history appears ready to turn in a new direction. New developments could emerge at any moment. New debates could take shape. New challenges could test the monarchy once again. Because inside the ancient walls of Windsor Castle, some battles end quietly, and others are only just beginning. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.